I never thought I'd tell this story to anyone, but when you experience a miracle, when the Virgin Mary herself appears in your hospital room on a cold June night, whispering words that pierce your soul like rays of light, well, you feel you have to share it. It was a Tuesday, exactly 3 in the morning, when I felt that different warmth spreading through every cell of my body. She was there, enveloped in a silvery white robe, with a face of infinite tenderness, telling me, "Fear not, my beloved son. Your faith will show you the path to healing." I was dying of terminal cancer. The doctors had given me 3 months to live, and suddenly everything changed. But let me start at the beginning, because this story needs to be told completely. My name is Alex Miller. I'm 48 years old, and all my life I've been a simple man from a small town in the countryside. I was born and raised in the same village where my father grew coffee, where my grandfather before him also planted, in a tradition that seemed as eternal as the mountains surrounding our small community. I've always been a man of faith, but a simple faith, you know? I went to Mass on Sundays, prayed before meals, trusted that God was taking care of everything. I never thought I'd need a miracle to keep living. The routine on the farm was my whole life. I woke up at 5 in the morning, had that strong coffee my wife Clara prepared, and went for a walk through the plantations. The smell of the damp earth in the early morning, the birds singing softly, the intense green of the coffee plants stretching as far as the eye could see, that was my world. I knew every coffee plant, every curve of the land, every shadow the trees cast when the sun rose behind the mountains. I had 2 children, Michael and Anna, who came to help me on weekends, and I dreamed of teaching them everything my father taught me. Everything started to change at the end of March last year. I was carrying some sacks of coffee to the warehouse when I felt a strange pain in my chest. It wasn't an ordinary pain. It was something different, as if someone was squeezing my heart from the inside. I stopped, took a deep breath, and thought it was just exhaustion. But the pain came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. Clara was worried. She insisted that I go to the doctor in town. I resisted, because countrymen don't like doctors, right? But the pain got worse, and I started losing my appetite, feeling a tiredness that didn't go away even with a whole night's sleep. When I finally went to the hospital after 2 weeks of Clara nagging me, the doctor ordered some tests. X-rays, blood tests, other things I didn't even know existed. I remember going back home thinking it was just gastritis, something simple that some pills would solve. But when I went back to get the results, I saw on Dr. John's face that things were serious. He looked at me with those eyes of someone who doesn't know how to deliver bad news, sighed deeply, and said, "Alex, we found something concerning. Lung cancer, advanced stage, metastases to other organs." Words that sounded like hammer blows to my head. Me, who never smoked in my life, who always led a healthy life working in the fields, breathing fresh air, how could I have cancer? The doctor explained that sometimes it happens, that there's no explanation, that life is like that. 3 months, maybe 6 with chemotherapy. Those were the words he said, but I couldn't process them. 3 months? 6 months? This couldn't be happening. I went back home in a silence that seemed to weigh more than the sacks of coffee I'd carried all my life. Clara saw it on my face before I even opened my mouth. She collapsed, cried like I'd never seen before. The kids were in shock, not knowing what to say. That night, sitting on the porch looking at the stars, I felt for the first time in my life that God was distant. Where was he when I needed him? Why me, who had always been a good man, who worked honestly, who took care of his family? The first chemotherapy sessions were hell. I lost my hair, vomited until my stomach was empty, became so weak I couldn't even get out of bed. Clara had to take over the farm with the help of the kids, while I withered away among medicines and nausea. The worst part wasn't even the physical pain. It was seeing my family falling apart little by little. Michael tried to be strong, but I saw him crying secretly in the bathroom. Anna stopped studying to take care of me, and Clara, my Clara, aged 10 years in 2 months. The village community rallied as they always do when someone is in need. Mrs. Mary, who lives next door, brought soup every afternoon. Mr. Joe, my longtime compadre, took on some tasks on the farm without me asking. The small chapel of Our Lady of Grace, located in the center of the village, was always full of people praying for me. But I felt it was only pity, that everyone already knew I had no salvation. In conversations, I perceived that tone of farewell, those careful words that people use when they don't know if they'll see you again. It was one of those afternoons when I was lying in my hospital bed waiting for another chemo session that I noticed something I had previously overlooked. There was a small image of Our Lady of Grace glued to the wall of the room, right in front of my bed. It was one of those simple images, the kind you see everywhere, but there was something different about it. Her eyes seemed to follow me, to accompany me in every movement. At first, I thought it was in my head, a side effect of the medication, but every time I looked over there, I felt a strange sense of peace. During the long hours of treatment, I started talking to her. I wasn't praying, I wasn't asking for anything specific. I just talked, like I talk to Clara when she's doing the dishes and I tell her about my day on the farm. I talked about my fear of dying, about the pain of leaving my family, about how unfair it all was. And I swear, sometimes, in the pauses between words, I felt like she was listening, that there was a presence there with me. Days went by, and my condition only worsened. The doctors changed the treatment protocol twice, tried more aggressive therapies, but the tumor kept growing. I could see in everyone's eyes that the end was near. Clara couldn't hide her despair anymore. The boys were as quiet as stones when they came to visit me. Even Father Anthony, the priest from our parish, started talking about accepting God's will and finding peace in suffering. I knew it was his way of preparing me for what was to come. It was on a particularly difficult night when the pain was so intense that the morphine wasn't working anymore that I felt rage take over me. I looked at the picture on the wall, and for the first time in my life, I yelled at God. It wasn't a shout with my voice, it was a cry from my soul. Why, Lord? Why me? What did I do to deserve this? Where is your mercy? I cried like a child, felt a rage I didn't even know existed within me. That night, I lost my faith. Completely. I thought it was all an illusion, that there was no one up there taking care of anything. But it was precisely in the darkest moment that the light appeared. It was a June dawn. Winter had come early that year, and it was bitterly cold. I was in a restless sleep, the kind where you don't rest whether awake or asleep, when I heard a different sound. It was like a song, but not music I knew. It was something ethereal, seeming to come from far away and very close at the same time. I slowly opened my eyes, still half asleep, and that's when I saw her. She was there, at the foot of my bed, more real than anything I had ever seen in my life. She wasn't like the picture on the wall. She wasn't like the statues in the church. She was a woman of flesh and blood, but at the same time, she was something more, something that transcended everything I knew. She was enveloped in a silvery white robe that seemed made of light, with a face that radiated infinite tenderness. Her eyes were like two oceans of compassion, and when she looked at me, I felt that she knew every pain I had ever felt, every tear I had ever shed. "Fear not, my beloved son," she said, and her voice was as soft as the wind in the mountains of my childhood. "Your faith will show you the path to healing." I wanted to speak, to ask if she was real, if I was dreaming, but the words wouldn't come. She approached and placed her hand on my chest, right where the tumor was. The warmth I felt was indescribable, as if the sun had entered within me. Every cell in my body vibrated with an energy I had never experienced. It was as if I was being rebuilt from the inside, as if something new was being born where there was only pain before. "Your mission is not yet over," she continued, and her smile was like a mother's hug. There are many people who need to hear your story, who need to know that miracles still happen. Don't doubt the power of faith. Don't doubt the love that is for you. She remained there for a few more minutes, or maybe it was hours. I couldn't tell. Time seemed to have stopped. When she began to leave, leaving behind that scent of roses that I still carry with me today, I managed to whisper, "Thank you, my mother." When I woke up the next morning, I thought it had been a dream. But there was something different about me, something I couldn't explain. The pain that had been with me for months had lessened. I could breathe better. I felt a vigor I hadn't felt in a long time. When the nurse came to administer the medication, she commented that my color was better. When the doctor made his morning visit, he frowned upon checking my vital signs. But I still didn't dare believe that anything had really changed. And I can tell you who's following this story. If you're going through any difficulty, if you're losing hope, don't give up. Keep watching stories like this. Subscribe to the channel to continue receiving these stories of faith and overcoming. Because sometimes we need to hear that miracles still happen to believe that they are possible in our lives too. The following 4 days were the most difficult of my journey. I knew something had happened that dawn, but the tests continued to show the same grim results. The doctors maintained the prognosis. The family remained worried, and I began to doubt everything. Had it just been a dream? Had my mind, desperate for hope, created an illusion? The doubt was almost worse than the disease itself, because it stole even that moment of peace I had experienced. I talked to Clara about what had happened, and she looked at me with those eyes full of love and concern. "Alex," she said, "if you say she appeared, I believe you. But don't torture yourself if things don't change the way you expect. Sometimes God has other plans for us." She was trying to protect me from disappointment, but I felt there was something more, something that I couldn't explain, but that was happening within me. It was on the 5th day that the miracle manifested itself for all to see. I was in the chemotherapy room, hooked up to the machines as usual, when suddenly a soft light filled the room. The heart monitors began emitting a different sound, as if playing a celestial melody. The nurses stopped what they were doing and looked around confused. I felt that warmth again coursing through my body, but this time it was more intense, as if every cell was being renewed. Dr. Helena, the doctor in charge of my treatment, came running when the equipment began to show inexplicable changes. She ordered the session stopped and that I be immediately taken for new tests. I remember her looking pale, with the expression of someone seeing something that defies everything she learned in medical school. The tests were done quickly, and when she returned with the results, her hands were trembling. "Alex," she said, her voice choked with emotion, "I don't know how to explain this. The tumor has shrunk 2 centimeters since the last exam. This is impossible." She showed the images on the screen, comparing them to the previous exams. It was visible. Where there had once been a dark, aggressive mass, there was now a significantly smaller area. The metastases had also regressed. In 30 years of medicine, I've never seen anything like it. We'll repeat the tests tomorrow to be sure, but this has no scientific explanation. The news spread through the hospital corridors like wildfire. Nurses, doctors, other patients, everyone wanted to know what was happening. Some spoke of errors in the tests, others of misdiagnosis, but I knew exactly what was happening. The Virgin Mary had kept her promise. The miracle was not only physical, but also spiritual. I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in months, a certainty that everything would be all right. Clara rushed to the hospital when she received the call. When she saw me, she collapsed in tears, but this time they were tears of joy. "I knew it," she said, hugging me as if she never wanted to let go. The boys came the next day, and for the first time in months, I saw hope in their eyes.
Michael hugged me tightly and whispered, "Dad, I was afraid of losing you." Anna, who has always been the most emotional, couldn't stop crying and repeating, "Thank you, Our Lady, thank you." In the following days, the exams continued to show impressive improvements. With each new tomography, each new blood test, the doctors became more perplexed. The tumor continued to shrink, the metastases disappeared, my health indices improved exponentially. Dr. Helena called in other specialists, organized a medical board, but no one could explain what was happening. "It's spontaneous remission," some said. "Rare cases, but they happen."
I smiled and let them believe in science. I knew that something much greater was at work. After 3 weeks of intensive monitoring, I was discharged from the hospital. It wasn't just a temporary discharge, it was a final discharge. The cancer had practically disappeared, leaving only a few isolated cells that the doctors said the body itself would take care of eliminating. When I left that white building for the last time, not as a terminally ill patient, but as a cured man, I felt like I was experiencing a second birth. The first thing I did was go straight to the Our Lady of Grace Chapel. I entered that sacred space I had known since childhood, knelt before the altar, and lit a candle. But it wasn't an ordinary candle. It was a special candle that Clara had commissioned, with a prayer engraved on it that read, "Thank you, Mother, for not giving up on me." When I finished praying, I felt that gentle presence again, that scent of roses that accompanied me throughout my healing. News of my recovery spread through the village like lightning. People came to see me, wanted to hear the story, wanted to touch me as if I were a lucky charm. Some believed in the miracle, others sought rational explanations, but everyone recognized that something extraordinary had happened. Father Anthony organized a special Mass of Thanksgiving, and that day the chapel was too small for the many people who came to celebrate. What impressed me most was how my healing affected the entire community. Mrs. Mary, who had always been a sad woman since she lost her husband, started to smile and sing again while tending her garden. Mr. Joe, who had been discouraged about the farm, gained new energy and began planning new plantings. The grocery store clerk, who hadn't shown joy in years, started singing hymns while working. It was as if the miracle had spread, touching the heart of every person who knew my story. I returned to the coffee plantations with a completely different perspective. Each coffee plant I looked at, each bean I harvested, was like a gift from God. The work that was once just routine became a constant prayer. I talked to Our Lady as I walked through the coffee fields, thanking her for every day I had to live, for every moment I could spend with my family. The farm had never been so productive, as if even the earth was celebrating the miracle. Michael and Anna started coming to the farm more often, not just to help, but to learn. It was as if they had understood that life is precious and that every moment with family is a treasure we cannot waste. I began to teach them not only the technique of planting coffee, but the philosophy behind the work, respect for the land, patience with the time of each thing, gratitude for everything we receive. Today, 6 months after the apparition, I feel stronger than ever, not just physically, but spiritually. My faith isn't the simple, automatic faith it once was. It's a tested faith, a faith that's been through the fire of doubt and emerged purer. I know Our Lady is always with me, not just in times of crisis, but in every breath, every smile, every hug from my family. Sometimes, as the sun sets behind the mountains, and I'm sitting on my porch, watching Clara prepare dinner and listening to my children laugh, I get emotional remembering how everything changed. A year ago, I thought my story was ending, that my mission on earth was over. Today, I know it was just beginning. Many people come to me wanting to know the secret of the miracle, as if there were a magic formula to achieve healing. I always give the same answer. There's no secret, there's only faith. Not blind faith,
but a faith that accepts that there are mysteries in life that our minds can't comprehend, that there is a love so great that's always ready to support us, even when we think we're alone. I asked to take home the small statue of Our Lady of Grace that was on the hospital wall. It's now on my nightstand, and every night before bed, I talk to it. I don't ask for more miracles. I don't ask for anything beyond what I've already received. I just give thanks. I'm thankful for being chosen to live this testimony, for being an instrument so that other people believe that miracles still happen.